Hi, and welcome back to Rain or Shine Gardening. I'm Katie, and today I am going to take you on a garden tour of my front yard, my front garden space. And it's been a while. I think the last one I posted was in June, and a lot has happened since then. I did have earlier in the spring a garden bed expansion project where I expanded some of the beds behind me here and planted in a lot of annuals and some perennials, and things are just really starting to grow and explode this time of year. So, I'm going to use this video as a way to document what I planted where and just share some of the things that are looking amazing in August. There's a lot of dahlias that are just starting to really bloom and explode this time of year. So, this will be great for me to look back on to figure out what I planted where, what maybe I want to repeat in future years, what maybe I don't want to repeat, and why. Um, and so it'll just be good to have this for myself. But I wanted to take you along and share this with you as well here in August. I know this time of year can be a little bit challenging for people sometimes. Sometimes, the heat kind of gets to us. Maybe we're fighting some what feels like never-ending battles with some pests in the garden. And as fall approaches, we're just kind of ready for that cool down. But this time of year, it can also mean that we have some really beautiful things blooming, and it is important to be able to enjoy those things that are in our garden that are blooming and looking wonderful because gosh darn it, we deserve it after putting in all that work. So today I decided to bring along my emotional support mug for my coffee on my garden tour here early in the morning. And it's a really pretty mug with some flowers on it, and it says, "You're doing great." So I like to use this mug when I'm feeling a little bit like I'm on the struggle bus in my own garden. But I wanted to share that with you and just share that I think you all are doing great as well this time of year. It's important to support each other. So, without further ado, I think we will get started on our tour of the front garden. This morning, I'm going to start here by my front entrance area. I'm by my front door right now, and you can see my limelight standard that I have planted here. Did not appreciate the rain that we had in the last few days. So the blooms are extremely huge this year, and it bloomed out wonderfully. The pollinators love the blooms as well. And then we got some rain and everything just flopped. So I tried to come out and shake off the blooms to see if that would help, but I think this is how the tree is going to be the remainder of the year. But it's still beautiful. It's really great to have up here by my front entry walkway because it's the first thing you kind of see as you round the corner, come out of the house. And it is really beautiful as the blooms come out in July, and then as it starts blooming more in August. The blooms do have a bit of burn on them from some of the heat that we've had, so they're starting to turn brown a little bit. But I'm hoping that by leaving them on, we'll get some pink color on these also. These are the garden beds that line my driveway, and they're starting to look a little bit tired and a little bit worn from this heat, but they really filled in beautifully with so many different colors and different plants here. I've got a mix of annuals and perennials. I have a lilac here that is adding some really great greenery even after it's done blooming. It was a spring bloomer. And my sweet potato vine that I plugged in here is just going crazy and climbing all over. You can see it's climbing even on top of that boxwood that I have in here. So I need to come in and maybe control that a little bit. But the impatiens are beautiful. That's the pink flower right in here. I see that my lupin has spread. So I've got some lupin even coming up here. So hopefully next spring that will come up and give me some blooms. And I have some apple blossom hardy geranium planted here in front, and that repeats up this bed. So you see there's some more here, some peony that's starting to color up, that's done blooming. And as I go up here, you can see the bubble gum that's kind of poking through. That's a Supertunia Vista bubble gum. And some more of the sweet potato vine. I've got a couple roses in here as well. And that hardy geranium with the little pink blooms is so cute. I love having that repeat in here. And then you see some coneflower. This I planted last year, and it's the Sunseeker Salmon coneflower. And I absolutely love these blooms. If I could have this all over in my garden, I would. I am just in love with the color, that kind of bright pink salmony color. It's really great. Complements all the other things in my garden really well. And those impatiens and the sweet potato vine again repeating. I do have an iceberg rose growing on this side of my trellis, my arbor here that leads out into my front yard. And this is the second flush of blooms this year, and it really is blooming out right now. And it's throwing off some really tall runners. So I'm going to have some trimming to do on this pretty soon, but it's doing really well, even though it's been fighting black spot. It's leafed out again and is creating some really great blooms. So I love having this here. Right, and coming across the front of the yard, I have the other side of the limelight hydrangea there and some Gara that's growing up. This has a really pretty variegated leaf on it. You see the striping, so that makes it really interesting, and having it flow here kind of coming out into the yard is really great. I did do some cleanup recently on these hostas. They were getting some burned out leaves, a little bit of browning in some spots, so I came in and just cleaned those up a little bit, and they look a lot better. Across the front here, I've got these two pots that I planted up, and you can see they are doing really well. So in each of these pots, I have my thriller that's standing up really tall are dahlias, and so I've got one on each side there. Then I've got this black ipomea sweet potato vine and some petunias there in the middle, and then another bright ipomea coming out the side. So that kind of flanks the bench that I have here in front. And we kind of call this our sunset bench. So if we sit here at night when the sun is setting, it's a beautiful view of the sky. This is a new dahlia to me. It's called Lauren Michelle, and it might be one of my favorites. So I love these dahlias that have a different color under the petals. You can see that almost bright, darker fuchsia color. And then if you look at the inside of the dahlia, it's kind of a lighter pink striped color. So it's just so interesting to have those kind of dual colors on the flower. And this is one of my favorites this year. I love it. And this is that container on the other side of the bench. You can see the container is almost all the way covered now. And I have a dahlia on this side, and it is just starting to bloom. So I don't have any open blooms yet, but you can see it's also kind of a fuchsia pink color, and it's called Southern Belle. So I'm excited to see what that one looks like inside. I do have a stake in each side of the pot so I can tie my dahlia up, and that way it'll be supported once it does start blooming. Under my bench in the front here, I have some ajuga planted, and you can see that doing really well. Those are some starts I took off another plant, and then some sweet woodruff also underneath. And these are plants that tend to like more shade, which is why I put them under my bench. And they can just kind of spread around and kind of take up that area under the bench. So, and the reason that I planted some things there instead of leaving that empty is because I want it to help as weed suppression. I don't want to have to be reaching under the bench all the time to weed. I do see some grass coming up and some weeds, so I do need to get on top of that so that it doesn't grow up in those flowers. But then you can see behind the bench, I have some annuals growing. I have a couple different super tunias here and then some salvia mixed in. And the reason I planted these here, I didn't really have a plan to plant these here, but my local nursery was at the end of their annuals, and they put out an advertisement online: come pick up annuals, they're free, we're going to dump them all at noon. So I could not get there faster to go pick up some annuals, and I just stuck them in the ground. I'm reworking a lot of areas in my garden. And so my theory was, even though I did not plan to have these colors in my garden, that something was better than nothing. And it does add a lot of color. It's kind of busy, so I don't think I'm probably going to repeat it, but I like it this year and it's doing really well. It's backed by some Gara and I have some iris back in behind the Gara. And then I have a bunch of my roses. And this is actually a really exciting idea for a project. I have something in mind that I am going to be doing. I don't know if it's going to be this fall or in the springtime, but I'm going to completely rework this area and create more of a pathway for my anniversary rose garden. And so I think I've mentioned it on a couple videos before, but every year for our anniversary, my husband Justin and we pick out a rose for our garden. And this year is year number 13 for us. So we have 13 roses and it's just fun to be able to shop for them. And what we do is we look at the traditional or the modern anniversary gift for the year. You know how they kind of have different themes or different gifts for each year of anniversaries. Well, we look at that to get an idea of some kind of rose that we want. So I will be making a video kind of expanding on that and explaining it more. But long story short, we look for maybe, if it's a gift of silver, then we might look for a rose that has some kind of metal theme or silver theme or, something in the name of it that aligns with that. It just makes it kind of fun. And we get a lot of different roses that way. So we have quite a few planted here up in this area, but we are going to rework this. And I want to have a pathway that comes out by this arbor in the side of our yard and kind of loops around and then goes back this way, kind of behind this hydrangea. There's a little pathway back here informally that we walk to get to this garden area. But I want to create a little flagstone pathway that kind of curves around. And then I want to plant the roses on both sides of that pathway. Because right now, it's just how it is. But every year, kind of chaotically, we look for a place that is open that we can plant the rose, but it hasn't had a lot of rhyme or reason into why we planted roses in which location. It's also hard to get to because there's no pathway right now. So it makes deadheading difficult. It makes getting to them to cut blooms for arrangements difficult. So, kind of reworking this area is really exciting. And now that we got this arbor installed and we expanded some of the other garden beds in our garden, it just kind of makes sense to create a pathway similar to this flagstone pathway over in this garden bed, but create a pathway that kind of connects more areas of the yard. And then our rose garden will make a little more sense in this area too. This whole area looks so different than it did just earlier this year. I'll pop up a little before picture of when I had some of the lines painted on the grass of where we wanted to expand our garden beds. And sometimes I have to remind myself that that was just this year because I can't believe how different it looks already. So in just a few months, it's transformed into this cottagey, comfortable cottage garden that I'm going for here. And I'll just kind of walk around and show you a few things in it. I do love lemon coral sedum. I have it kind of repeated along the border in a few different places. But it really brings that bright pop of chartreuse to my garden that I love. I did plant some conifers back here to keep some winter interest in this area after all the annuals kind of die back. I do have a mix of perennials and annuals. You'll see one of my favorites is Nepeta. I have that repeated also. And these white zinnias. And here's some more of those free annuals that I got this year. So again, I don't plant a lot of yellow or a lot of these bright colors, but I am happy with the brightness that they bring to my garden. I probably wouldn't have had them unless they were free, and they were free, so I'm going to definitely take advantage of free plants. This is an area that I also expanded, and it's got some zinnias. There's some different supertunias, some veronica here that's coming out with this is its second or third flush of blooms. I do have a small rose back in here, and then the sweet potato vine that's kind of taking over. I do have some denim and lace Russian sage tucked in, and some more echinacea here that came back for me. I have a dahlia that's popping up here that I missed when I was digging out all the others when we expanded this bed. But everything is just really filling in nicely and is looking great. I do have some Italian cypress that are up against this fence here, and they're kind of planted with some lemon cypress also. So that's going to create some nice evergreen interest during the winter time for me. I don't know how well this shows up on camera. It just looks kind of messy from here. But on both sides of this bed, I have a serendipity allium in the middle here that's kind of blooming out with those purple pom poms. That looks really cute. And I have some veronica on both sides and some lamb's ear also. And this I just took some starts from other places in my garden and planted. But I planted these two asters on both sides, and they were really small when I planted them. And they've just been growing and growing, and all the foliage is getting bigger and bigger, and they were not blooming. And then all of a sudden, last week, I came out and I noticed the first bloom. So finally, it's blooming. It's got these pretty purple flowers with the yellow centers, and it's looking really great in the garden. So I like this area. It is a little full. I plant things very full, but I think it adds to that comfortable cottage style that I'm going for. I do have my dahlias mixed into my garden beds, so I don't have them separate in a cut flower garden. I keep them in my garden with all of the other things. And so this is a cafe au lait. It's my first time growing this dahlia, and I'm really excited to see what it blooms out like. And right now in August, it has buds, but it has not bloomed. So that's something to look forward to in a future garden tour. This area of this garden bed is also filling in really nicely. I've got more lamb's ear, and I've got this little lime that's blooming, and its blooms are already turning pink, which is really pretty. This area of my garden is where I have my fountain, and I've got a red grape that's growing around the fountain, and it's actually growing on top of my fence all the way down almost to where the wooden fence is. You can see it's growing on top of this red rose that I have. And I'm actually going to try to train it so that it goes along the top of this fence. I would love to have clusters of grapes growing all along here. It'll make it really easy to pick, and the grape really wants to grow. You can see it's even reaching out and trying to grab a hold of this apple tree here. But this is the first year that we've had quite a few clusters of grapes. And this is a red seedless variety. So it's really great for snacking on. And I am so glad that it's planted here. I recently planted these lemon cypress and this blue cypress here by the fence. And I think this is an area that I'm going to plant up with some of the things that I picked up at Andrew Seed over in Ontario, and then that I picked up down at Bauman's Farms recently too. So I'm excited to get some things in the ground around my apple tree. You can see the trunk is getting pretty big on that. And my climbing rose and my little bench here in the corner. And then my hydrangea is pretty much out of bloom. So this is a hydrangea I got from my grandma's yard. And it has some kind of aged blooms on it, but pretty soon it'll be time for me to cut this back, because this is the kind of hydrangea that you prune right after it blooms. You don't wait to prune it in the spring. So you can see it's already forming up some of the buds back on the stem. And I don't want to cut those off, because if I do, that means I'm going to forfeit blooms next year. So I need to get in and cut my hydrangea back. And coming around this way, I have some dark purple ipomea that's really spreading out. Almost everything has covered up the bricks here in this new garden bed. And I do have some eucalyptus, and I really like using this baby blue eucalyptus here in flower arrangements. And walking around here on the pathway, I've got a big artichoke that's growing, and I don't have any blooms yet, but I'm keeping it here because I want to see if I can get some blooms, and see what that will look like. I know their blooms are big and purple and beautiful, so I'm hoping that I'll get some of that. But if not, the leaves are really interesting, kind of a blue color to them almost, and I am happy with the foliage accent. I have a couple more dahlias here. This is High School First Love and another Cafe au lait. And these two are budded up, but I don't have any blooms on them, so something else to look forward to. And then panning over here, you can see this is all the new expanded garden bed with my flagstone walkway. This area of the garden has a lot of new things I planted this year. I planted these two cypress on each side of the walkway. And then I have some salvia that I just did some cutback on, also on both sides. And then I planted these little lavender plugs on both sides. And they're getting big enough now that I might want to come in and shear them back a little bit just so their structure stays nice. I don't want them to create too large of a woody base, and I kind of want them to be uniform. So if you look back, kind of sticking up in that Ipomea, there's a taller lavender back in there. And then up here, there's some really short ones. So by giving some of these a prune, it's more likely that they'll stay a similar size. So walking in the pathway, you can see some of my Brennera that I have planted on both sides there. Some of it's getting a little crispy from some of the sun, but this area does stay pretty shaded by the trees, so it doesn't get a lot of full sun. I just did a cutback on some foxglove that are back in this area after they dropped all of their seed for this year. And you'll see too in this back of the bed, I have some rudbeckia, some black-eyed Susan, just a lot of other repeating plants, some Gara, my lavender, my Ipomea, my supertunias. And on this side, I have some verbena, which is really great. I love using that in some of my arrangements, my flower arrangements. This is the other side of that walkway after I walked through, and you see it's really coming together. I like the lushness and fullness of all the plants growing in. It really turned out nice. And down this side, I do have more Ipomea. You can see that rudbeckia in the background kind of creates a nice backdrop. And then the Ipomea is kind of going crazy in front there. But on the left side of the screen, you'll see one of my new dahlias, and this is called Preference, and it's a cactus style dahlia. I really like the color that this is. It kind of is almost that peachy apricot color, but it also has so many shades of pink. It really goes well in a lot of my different bouquets with different colors. I've got another dahlia here that's all budded up but has not bloomed yet. And then down here is another dahlia that's new to me this year, and this one's called Sebastian. And I also really love this one. It almost has a glowing quality to it with the way the outside of the petals and the inside are pink, and then it kind of, I don't know, has this yellow middle to it. So I like those and how they're turning out for my bouquets too. This is also a new dahlia. I have a lot of new ones, and they're all kind of interspersed in my garden. So I don't have a cut flower garden, but I do have these kind of mixed in all over. And I love this apple blossom one. It's so kind of dainty and cute and petite. It's got those big petals around the outside and the accents on the inside. I don't know what it is about this dahlia specifically. I don't have this color in a lot of my garden. It's really bright and hot and unique, compared to a lot of the other pinks and purples and things that I have. But this is the biggest pollinator attractor flower that I have in my whole garden. It There's just multiple bees on each flower at any given time. There's right now, I think, I don't know, probably 100 bees on this entire plant. They're just going crazy for it. Okay, now I'm down below on my front sidewalk, and you can see the Gara that I have planted down here is going crazy. We just had some rain too, so it's kind of coming down into the sidewalk even more than usual. But it's really pretty, especially when the wind starts blowing and it starts moving around. It looks like little butterflies. So I love this area of the yard. And then here, I've recently had to tie up and stake up some of these dahlias. These are the Kelvin Floodlight dahlias. They're big dinner plate size, and they've had a lot of blooms. I've put out a lot of bouquets with these flowers out in my free flower stand in front of my house. In this area, I cut back some of the nepeta, but it is looking really nice right about now. We've got the silverberry supertunia mixed in with the bubblegum supertunia and some black and some chartreuse green colored ipomea. And that nepeta tucked in, some iris with my Chinese dogwood. And then my new tree that I planted at my thundercloud flowering plum tree, and everything just looks really nice through here right now. Here's some more of the front area of my yard. And you can see here I've got some hostas that are getting a little sunburnt and crispy in the front of this bed here next to my driveway. But I do have a lot of dahlias here also. And I don't have the name of these because I planted them before I was too interested in keeping track of what they are. But I've got this kind of classic white. I just tied them up so they look a little interesting here right now. And then I've got this pink one here too that I like to include in a lot of bouquets. But everything is blooming and looking so beautiful right now. You can see kind of down the sidewalk my color scheme, how everything's kind of blooming and growing together. And my front yard, my expanded garden beds. Sometimes I like to just stand out here and take it all in. Well, thanks for coming along with me on my August front yard garden tour. My coffee is gone, so I think it's time to go inside. The day is just beginning, so I'm excited to continue in the month of August to see what's blooming, even though we're here at the end of August, but to look forward to some of the cool down and the cooler months. And then just reminding myself to slow down and enjoy the blooms, because as overwhelming as sometimes August can be with bug pressure, feeling hot, feeling tired, and worn out a little bit. This is what we're dreaming of in spring, all these blooms and the beauty of the garden. And it won't be here forever. That's the joy of gardening, and also the curse of gardening, is you put in all that work and effort to enjoy these months, and just knowing that the fall is coming and the cool down's coming, and pretty soon that first frost will get here. So enjoying the blooms while we can, and documenting it so I can look back in those cooler months on my blooming garden to be able to enjoy it. And thank you for coming along with me today to take a look at what's blooming in my front yard in August. And rain or shine, I'll see you next time.